Hi everyone, I'm going to do a quick review here on Module 2. I've recorded this once before and it got a little lengthy, so I'm going to try it again because I know y'all don't want to sit here and listen to 20-30 minutes of this. So Module 1 is done, right? We've got it wrapped up. I went through your discussions. I really enjoyed them. I think you guys did a good job with engaging with your peers and then telling us what your interests were in anthropology. So thank you for that. I did an announcement about kind of the rubric and how to use it to kind of gauge what you need to talk about before you submit it, and then also to help you understand my feedback at the end of it. So if you have any questions on that, just send me an email. So now we're moving on to Module 2. Going to talk just a touch about evolution, and then we're going to focus on race. So you've read your readings in your chapters. Let's see, it's here for your discussion. I've got page 195 to 200 and then 423 through 424. You also had to watch Skin Color is an Illusion. And I believe you had one more short video on there also that I wanted you guys to watch. You've got a discussion which is due Thursday, and right now it is 12:50 a.m. here in Arkansas, so it's technically Thursday. Your discussion is going to be to tonight at 11:59 p.m., whatever your time zone is. So please don't forget that. Also, you have a final project part A milestone interview preparation outline that's going to be due Sunday at 11:59 for your time zone. So if you get into those and you have some questions, let me know. Please try to hit those deadlines. And yeah, we're gonna roll on here with Module 2. So hopefully you guys have already read about it, made it through your videos. It's just gonna be a review for you. So race and racism in anthropology. A lot of disciplines in their early years played a large role in racism, unfortunately, and anthropology was one of those also. Anthropology got on the wrong side of history, and now we kind of have to talk about it. All right, so race is relatively new. It emerged in the 17th century, so about the 1600s. That may sound crazy to you. You're like, that's 300-400 years ago. What are you talking about? Relatively recent. You think of the lengthy span of humans that we've been here, that is really like a small little blip in our timeline. So it is relatively new. So race was an attempt to categorize people by their physical differences. The main one that we know of is skin color, but it wasn't just skin color. So it was a lot of different physical traits. So for example, you've got hair texture, facial features, eye formation, different aspects, like we're going to talk about your skull in just a minute. So different visible, that you can see just by looking at someone, traits that are used to kind of box people into these different categories. So why? Why exactly did race come about? So race is a social construct. It is not biological. It's something that we as a society, I use that term we kind of loosely, came up with, like invented. It's not real, and when I say not real, I know that sounds really loaded, right? Because it's very real, especially if you experience it. It's very real to you, but it's not real in the sense of you can group us into biological variances based on how we look on the outside. That's not exactly how that works. So race was developed for social identification and then kind of to stratify people. So this race that I put in this box is superior to this race that I put in this box, and I put them in their little individual boxes based on these visible characteristics, these physical traits that I can see. So these early disciplines, such as anthropology, really got into this race thing, and they kind of forced biology to kind of say, look, we can tell through biological differences that there are these different races, right? So it's almost like having the little square hole with the toy, and you've got the circle, and you're trying to like make sure everything fits where it's supposed to, even though it really doesn't. You're just gonna push that circle through there anyway. That's kind of what happened here with like anthropology. So in the early years here, the 19th century, kind of into the beginning of the 20th century, different scientists, not only anthropologists, there were some other ones too, but anthropology kind of took the leading role in what was known as physical anthropology. So physical anthropology is biological anthropology. We just call it biological anthropology now, but you will see it as physical anthropology in a lot of literature. I think your textbook even might mention it briefly as physical. So what they did is they decided that they could measure your skull, and the different measurements would tell them if you were European descent or African descent, or if you were Native American descent. And they're like, we can figure all this out by skulls. So if we just have a bunch of skulls, we lay them on a table, we get these measurements, we're going to be able to say who's what. And for example, one of these was if you were to measure an ape skull and you were to measure an African American skull, any form of descent from Africa or Africans themselves, that there were going to be a lot of similarities. And if you measured a European skull, it was going to be different. If you measured a Native American skull, it was going to be different. And they used these measurements to suggest things like this group is smarter than this group can't handle, having this land and stuff, they need to be assimilated into our culture. This group needs a master, they're not able to handle themselves. And this is how we start getting that social stratification. So it's like, this is science, right? We're backing ourselves up in science. So it has to be right. Well, it was not right. It's called pseudoscience. So if you know what that pseudo means, it means fake. So fake science, right? They were literally claiming they were coming up with all of this. And look, we got proof now. And they didn't. I mean, it was just all fake. There was no legitimacy to any of it. But thankfully, here comes our boyfriend, Boaz. And some of you did your discussion, let's say your article that you went to find on him. And I appreciated that because he is the father of anthropology in Americas, in the Western Hemisphere. And he kind of stepped in at this time, and he's like, I don't think y'all are right. I think y'all are making some of this up. So he did his own study, and he studied children of immigrants who had come to the United States in the early 1900s. And what he found out is that the skulls, he measured kids that were still alive, so he didn't just have skulls here, that they're, hold on just a second, I keep having computers close on me here, that the measurements from their skulls differed significantly from their parents. And he's like, what's going on here? If we're saying all European skulls are this size, Native American skulls are this size, African skulls are this size, on down the line, why are these different? And he learned that it was based on environmental conditions. They had an impact on your skull. And so Boas argued that if craniofacial features were this malleable, they could change in just a single generation, that this wasn't right, what these other scientists were saying here. And you couldn't use these cranial measurements here to define race. And thankfully he stepped in there, and that was pretty courageous of him to do during this time period when all of these scientists, were trying to back their racism based on scientific data of measuring cranium. So thank you, Franz Boas. We appreciate that. His students kind of followed in his footsteps, and they were constantly at the forefront here in this battle that you're using science wrong, right? You can't use science to kind of validate your racism. This is fake. So now here in our current times, like 2023, we have the argument of still race and kind of biology. So a lot of the general public can't really separate the two out. That's because they don't have the knowledge. Some don't want the knowledge, unfortunately. And, some of these people haven't taken anthropology classes. So we got to get them in these anthropology classes so they can understand what the difference is between race and then our biology and our genetics. So it's been, let's see, COVID was 2020, 2021-ish. I read an article, might have even been 2022, where it came out that you could tell who was susceptible to COVID based on race. And a lot of the scientific community and anthropologists were like, whoa, wait a minute. We know that that's not exactly how it works. There is something called biological race, but that's a little different. It's in your chapter, so make sure you read about that. But we're focusing on the social construct of race. It's become so entangled in our world now that it's hard for people to start separating that back out. So what happened is all the data started coming out about deaths related to COVID, about hospitalizations related to COVID, and Black or African American had a larger percentage of deaths, had a larger percentage of being hospitalized, had a larger percentage of having long COVID than like any other groups. So like this graph I've got up here, it talks about the pandemic's racial disparity. So the way the article came out and the way it was worded that made everybody go, whoa, wait a minute, was that African Americans or Blacks were more susceptible to COVID than any other group. And it was like, why? Well, we can go back to the social aspect of that. If you start breaking all this down, which they weren't doing, they weren't going any really deeper than that. And it was almost like that pseudoscience, again, that fake science. They're saying, look, we have all this data, which they do. It was legit data, right? I mean, they were getting real numbers. They weren't making the numbers up. It was really there. But they weren't giving the public the full picture. So, like, why is that? If we look at this chart, why is the Black or African American so much larger in COVID-19 deaths than any other group? You have to look at a few things. The access to healthcare, food access, like, food with like high nutrients in it. Think of like the organic food and stuff like that on the shelves. That stuff is really expensive, and not a lot of people can afford that. So if you're in a minority group that might be already struggling a little bit, that's going to be really hard to get, if not impossible for you. Diseases, like in your environment around you. So what they were really seeing is that Black or African Americans, and then we've almost in half here, but American Indian or Alaskan Native, and then Hispanic or Latino is our leading groups here. We did not look at the history. We didn't look at current conditions. We didn't look at racism. We didn't look at any of that to try to figure out why Black or African American had such a large percentage. Instead, they're just like, this group is more susceptible to COVID. And that was highly irresponsible. If you don't start kind of fleshing out these other factors, one, no one is going to pay attention to them. Second, you're maybe unintentionally, maybe it was intentional, I'm not sure, you're perpetuating racism. And then nothing is going to change. Like, healthcare is not going to improve, food access is not going to improve, focusing on diseases is not going to improve because you just kind of put out this data without any more depth to it. So that's why it's really important for anthropology, and anthropologists did stand up and go, whoa, wait a minute here. You know, we need the full picture and you're not providing it. So anthropology now is back on, you know, on the right side of history here. Again, thank you, Franz Boas, for getting us on the right path to try to dig a little deeper into some of these things and the social aspects, and then what exactly we can do, and then how we can educate people kind of on how they should kind of view topics like this. So I'm getting a little long-winded again. Sorry, we're up to 16 minutes, but thank you for listening to it. I hope it helped kind of sum stuff up, helped you with your discussion topic, which is due tonight. Don't forget, 11:59, your time zone, whatever time zone you're in. So don't forget that, and if you need me, just shoot me an email, and I will talk to y'all later.